Now to a stark warning from the Foreign Office for Brits in Sweden. It says that Islamist terrorists are very likely to carry out an attack. It comes after a number of incidents in the country where the Quran has been burnt. So, in 2017, an Islamist terrorist deliberately drove a lorry into a crowd in the Swedish capital, Stockholm. 5 people, including an 11-year-old girl, were killed. There has been a lot of racial tensions, mainly driven by a lack of integration and very high levels of rapid immigration into Sweden. A lot of segregated communities, shootings very, very regularly, a lot of grenades going off as well. And then that has prompted a series of political responses, which has actually included things like people burning copies of the Quran. And thus, here we are. I'm joined now by counter-terrorism expert Wasiq Wasiq. Wasiq, thank you very, very much. Now, a couple of things here. Probably you shouldn't burn the Quran. It's a little bit like when that individual, that chap at Batley Grammar School, decided to show a picture of the Prophet Muhammad to some kids. That was a silly thing to have done. But you also probably shouldn't react to that by, threatening to behead him or possibly setting off bombs in Stockholm somewhere. I mean, it's all a bit of a mess, isn't it?
Well, look, Patrick, the fact is that people have the right to burn the Quran if they wish to do so. People also have the right to be upset as a result of that burning. What you don't have the right to do is to take the law into your own hands because you are upset that someone's gone and burned the Quran. And now what we're seeing increasingly in places like Sweden, in Britain itself, in some of these Western nations, France particularly, is that lots of these Islamist extremists, or sometimes they might just be law-abiding Muslims, are then taking the law into their own hands because they're so upset about acts of blasphemy or the burning of the Quran, and they wish to do harm, not just on the people who have carried out that attack, but also on everyone else, as if everyone else is a bystander. And this is absolutely ridiculous and something that we should not be condoning whatsoever.
But is there actually any way to stop that attitude existing? Because if you are importing people or welcoming people from parts of the world where it would be normal to think that you can blow people up if they burn a copy of the Quran, but how do you stop that?
Well, I think we need to put this into context. In the West, we just don't have a culture of burning books, whether it's religious books or any other types of books. We've seen how the Nazis did it during the World Wars. We've seen how ISIS were doing it in terms of Iraq and Syria, of just destroying cultural and heritage sites. This is just something that we don't do. We have obviously a fringe element of people who do go out and do that, but the vast majority of British people, of Western people, just don't go around doing that. So what we need to do is we need to try and build some sense of understanding between these people who wish to go ahead and do this, and also to try and moderate some of these extremists, because you can, through the law, to prevent them from actually carrying out some of these attacks.
Is this maybe a lesson for us to learn here as well? I mean, the reason I'm focusing on this is because I can see exactly the situation happening here at times, which is that if things offend people's culture, and that culture is not the indigenous culture of whatever country it is that they're in now, in this case, Sweden, should they really have a right to try to impose their own level of offence onto a society that they're in?
No, absolutely not. We have British values here of liberty, freedom, democracy, and that's our culture here. We have freedom of speech and we have freedom of belief. And some of these individuals who obviously carry cultural baggage with them or religious baggage with them cannot force that onto everyone else. If you wish to be upset, that's fine. No one's preventing you from being upset, but you cannot expect anyone else to be upset on your behalf. And through that upsetness, prevent people from saying things or challenging ideas, challenging religion, challenging any sorts of ideologies. Because that's not, we don't live in an authoritarian regime. This is not Russia, this is Britain, this is the West. We do things better, and we can have the moral high ground when things like this do happen. Do
you worry, though, that stuff like this is going to become exacerbated? I mean, if people feel a bit at their wits' end of, watching rapid cultural change in wherever they're from, I mean, again, I just want to emphasise that I personally would have no desire to ever burn a copy of the Quran, and I think anyone who does that is probably a bit silly, right? And being deliberately offensive and provocative, to say the least. But then at the same time, it does highlight a problem, doesn't it? Which is that there clearly are massive groups of people who would react to that in an incredibly violent and aggressive way. And, I mean, there's no winners there, are there?
No, precisely, and this is what strategically it doesn't work. So I think what we need to see is perhaps the Muslim leaders coming out and actually condemning not just the burning of the Quran as part of our own British culture, but or any kind of book, but also to moderate our own community and say, look, these people are going to do it. They do have the right to do it. But we can't impose our own feelings onto them, and we need to work with them because we live here. This is our country as well, and this is our culture.
Wasiq, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to get your take. It's Wasiq Wasiq there, who's counter-terrorism expert.